Welcome to the Purposeful MD podcast. As a physician, you've sacrificed so much of your life for other people, your patients, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. What would it feel like to spend time doing what you enjoy and to live without guilt? I'm your host, Dr. Laura Sutton, a family physician, certified coach, and business owner. If you're a medical professional on a journey towards your most purposeful life, a life with more time and energy, and ultimately more joy, then this is the podcast for you. Welcome to the Purposeful MD podcast. I'm so excited to talk to Dr. Christy Gomez. So Christy and I have met and been brought into each other's world through our common publisher. So Christy's going to talk all about her book and share about that. And we worked with the same publishing team. And so as I was publishing my book, I heard a lot of great things about her book. And so we got connected that way. So let me share a little bit about Dr. Gomez, and then we'll have her hear it in her story. So Christina Gomez is a gastroenterologist, a medical oncologist at Banner MD Anderson Cancer Center. She studied medicine at the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine and served as assistant professor at Yale University School of Medicine, Smilo Cancer Center. Did I say that right? For 15 years, Dr. Gomez collected poignant things her patients said to her and wrote the book, Stopped in My Tracks, a physician's collection of cancer patients' quotes to share their insights with a wider audience. And this book was released in June of 2023. Christy was born in Miami, Florida to Cuban parents and knew that from the age of 5 that she wanted to be a physician. She lives in Phoenix, Arizona with her young son, Danny. So wonderful to have you on the podcast with us.
Dr. Sutton, thank you. I'm honored to be here and to be meeting you, physician author, because I'm so attracted to that very title. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about you, how you got to where you are right now. Tell us your story.
Thank you. That's a beautiful question, because that's like the thread of my work now, right? That patient's stories are everything. So what about the physician's story? So it's true that you mentioned that I was very young when I knew. It's so odd because I didn't grow up in a family of physicians. I didn't grow in that lineage, if you will, like Rachel Naomi Remen writes, that we belong to this lineage of physician, the lineage of Maimonides. I didn't grow up in any of that. Hardworking Cuban family. And I knew early on, and my parents, I think they kind of laughed it off, right? Like my young son is mentioning all these different titles of astronaut and police officer and firefighter, and his changed, but mine didn't. And I remember I was very close to my dad. I still am, but I could hear a sense of concern as that didn't change. And I remember maybe 9 or 12, he's like, are you sure you want to do this? It's a really demanding life. What about your family? I was a kid and I wasn't thinking about a family, but I was sure that I wanted to be a physician. And so I joke that, it never changed. The answer never changed. But I remember telling him in high school or college as I was applying, I said, I have to try this. It hasn't wavered. And that's when he said, you have my full support, of course. And back then, this was 80s and 90s, things were a little different. And women in medicine, even then, we were still a minority. I think my class was one of the first ones that were truly 50-50. So whatever, University of Miami, and that was full speed ahead. I was able to complete all of my training there. It became home. I was there for 11 years. I was chief resident, and then I just stayed on as chief and fellowship in oncology. But then it was time to leave Miami. It was time, right? Like you're a lifer in a university, and then I got the opportunity through my mentor to be faculty at Yale, focus in GI oncology. And then now I was able to transfer, go out west And that's even a movement I think that has happened inside of me or in my work, moving west, right, to a bit of a slower pace, but nonetheless a full practice in oncology. I'm here at Banner MD Anderson in Phoenix. But that's my story, and this book came. Well, we'll go into that. But my book came in pandemic at the same time that I adopted a little boy. So I think my story is one of movement, of challenge, of hearing a thread, right? Medicine was a thread. If I'm more personal, adoption was a thread. Uh, and then following that and seeing it through. And so that's where I'm at now.
Yeah. I thank you so much for sharing all that. It's so beautiful. And you talk about the threads of you wanting to be a physician from when you were very young. And like you said, you followed that through. You stuck with that. And you wanted a child. And so you stuck with that. You wanted to write a book. And so you stuck with that. And so I'm definitely seeing this pattern here for you. And we were talking a little bit before we hit record about, yes, we'll talk about the book. We'll talk about anything you want to talk about for sure. But you said something really just poignant before we were recording about how you brought your son into your life. So do you mind
Ah,
sharing what that was like for you?
so I haven't really thought about it like this, but in the same way that medicine was just a thread that didn't change, so too was adoption. So I grew up in the church, and there were words in scripture that uh, resonated with me. uh, they kind of popped out to me. And there was a long time that I thought we all heard it the same way, right? A God who loves us in the spirit of adoption, a God who calls us his own or her own, right? Not friend, but mine. Right? This loving relationship of adoption, right? That word continued to resonate. And in the Judeo-Christian, right, tradition, then there was this story of Sarah and Abraham, and then boom, there's Isaac, right? And so this whole thing of promise, and that became a thread. Um, then I came to know Safe Haven and that whole idea, that whole movement of a safe place for babies that were born into really difficult situations, but where there's no questions asked. And as a physician, and as a person who honors people's stories, that whole idea became super attractive to me. And I said, I need to participate in Safe Haven, either in volunteer, or I'm going to have a Safe Haven baby, or and I lived in Florida for many years, and single motherhood and adoption, that was a whole question. But I moved to Connecticut to work at Yale, and there was all of a sudden this movement to recruit families. And I'd walk through streets of New Haven, and there'd be on a light post just like a tacked piece of paper, almost like open mic night or
Hmm.
couch for sale, 1-800 Kid Hero. And I typed that into my phone, and it was the link to the foster care system, to Department of Children and Families, and in particular, there was this, I don't know, movement to serve the gay community in Connecticut who wanted to be parents. And I belonged to the LGBT community, and I said, oh my God, a state that honors what my family could look like. And I'd watch TV, and again, 1-800 Kid Hero, right? A thread. And so I went back to prayer and spirituality, and once again, the same, right? I have loved you in the spirit of adoption. And so this calling that didn't waver. And then I began to do my training. I started my training, no one really knows this. Uh, the open house for DCF was on February 14th. And it wasn't lost on me who believes in numbers or who believes in dates, or that it wasn't a couch for sale and it wasn't a job as a barista. It was like 1-800 Kid Hero. Um, February 14 was the day that the open house began for potential foster parents. And I've never told this story, much less on recording or to the world, but I was being invited to love in a different way, right?
Yeah.
And people talk about how commercial Valentine's Day is, and so I couldn't believe it. Right? It wasn't about a reservation. That night, I rushed to a little office in the corner of the Northwest Hills of Connecticut. And there were just about 4 families, and my journey began. I did the entire year of prep. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell my family because I knew that was their gestation almost. And so I wasn't ready to be told. But then I get a phone call 4 days after the world shut down, March 2020. And there was a call that said, there's this little boy. Very few questions after, Danny came home, and I knew that my son was home, and I knew that that it was forever. That whole idea. The caseworkers rolled their eyes and said, that's unique. Give this time. And I said, yeah, there's certain things that we know. And so a year later, despite it being Zoom and still in pandemic, when vaccines were just making their way and families had not yet been able to travel or gather, our adoption was finalized. So he's 7 now, and I'm in the throes of the 2nd grade homework.
Oh my goodness. That is such a beautiful story. And he is so lucky that he chose you and you chose him and you chose each other. And I agree with you. I think he, these types of things. And so it sounds like that was just a truth for you that's shown in that moment. And especially the Valentine's Day, I'm with you. Numbers and dates and things like that have the significance. And it sounds like there's no better place to be on Valentine's Day than in that room where you were starting your journey.
Yeah. And as you're speaking, I remember my mentor, Dr. Roshalima. He was in my GI medical oncologist in my training. I spent my 3rd year with him. It's how I grew into GI. And, he taught me the concept of how he wanted us to be better than he. And he was extremely successful and prolific. And he said that, no, you guys are going to be better than me. Like, I want you guys to go out in the world and do better work. And then so that was new to me. And then he said something like, we raise each other, right? That you guys as my fellows are making me the professor that I am. And so I can't believe we're talking about this and we're bringing him up, because that's what I learned in parenting, right? That Danny's raising me, that I want him to be way better, or to have the opportunities that I can offer to him, but that he can take it and run. So that's the thread now, right? Where oncology or medicine and life, and I guess all of us have that story, but for me, alone in pandemic, right? I dreamed that my family would come, and the airlines were shut down. It wasn't safe. But yeah, right. That we raise each other, or that I needed Danny, really. That he's raising me. It's almost like our training in medicine, right?
Right.
Like, he's training me.
Yeah. It's so true. Parenthood is such that journey where I'm learning from my daughter all the time, and learning how to be a better person and a better mom and a better doctor and better coach and all the things. Yeah. They're our greatest teachers.
Yeah. Oh, that worked. And that didn't.
Yes, exactly. And the feedback's pretty immediate.
Pretty immediate.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait for them to be teenagers for the eye roll.
Right.
Yes,
for sure. Oh, that's so awesome. I definitely want to hear about the book. I mean, I want to know how that thread started for you. And so tell us, where did this idea come from? Tell us about the whole process.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I really mean it about being honored to meet you, physician author. And I can't wait to read the Purposeful MD, because early in my career, first year med school, we were given a book called Kitchen Table Wisdom by Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen. And we were introduced to Perry Class and to all physician authors. And we were invited to jot down, honestly, they talked about it as pearls, things that we learned at the bedside that we had learned in the books, but the book didn't really capture it, whatever it be, caput medusa, right? In a very cirrhotic patient, like jot that down because you saw it, or draw it, right? Be the scientist that you are. Like when we learned the scientific method, they asked us to keep that. And this was before, I'm aging myself a little bit, before cell phones or iPads or anything that was digital. But that didn't,
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
That's the 7-year-old. I'm in recording. Thank you. Sorry. You can.
Yeah.
To drop down pearls of wisdom, that which we pass on to our interns, our residents, to our patients. But Dr. Sutton, I didn't write those things down. I started quoting patients, or I started writing down verbatim, quote unquote, asking them to repeat what they just said, quotes, things they said to me that made me stop in my tracks, made me pause, made me reflect. Things that were raising me as a physician and as a person, things about life and death, things about the way they were coping with illness. I remember that my personal essay for my residency was about patients' quotes. I quoted patients. So if I really look back, that was my entire medical school career, where what people said mattered. And we were told early on, right, that the diagnosis is in the story, that 85% of the diagnosis lies in the history. If you take a good history, 15% of our work is putting that together. And that moved me. Like I took that like word of God. That's what I needed to do. I would feel the weight if the history wasn't great, right? Poor historian, like we sometimes see in notes. I was like, no, we need to delve deeper. How do we connect with this patient, right? The thread now is how do I connect to my 7-year-old, right? That's parenting. Mm-hmm. But so that's how the book happened. And I joked with patients, hey, can I quote that one day? Because I want to write a book about what patients say. And I really didn't know if I meant that, if it was ever going to happen, if it was just a joke. But fast forward, in pandemic, I bowed to Yale's care for the physician. There was basically this whole movement on how do we take care of each other in this really scary time. And we had been exposed to things, and there were mass shootings, and there were trauma surgeons who've been experiencing all that, but this was global. And young physicians were getting sick. And I personally was with a young child that I didn't want to rehome because I got sick, right? And add any transition. So they had a writing hour on how could we heal, nurture ourselves, serve under global pandemic at the risk of us getting sick at any moment, serving very sick people. I was in oncology, so infection on top of immune compromised state, and then the physician getting sick, and then our young families at home. There were so many layers. And then the layer of uncertainty. Well, they had a writing hour, and Brooke Adams Law was the guest speaker. She's our mutual published author, editor, publisher, writing coach. And she led us, I'm sorry, this one shouldn't have come in here. So she led us in writing, in freestyle. She asked us about writing an experience from med school, something that moved us, some experience that maybe we had never shared. And I remember jotting down my first loss, right? In the middle of the night, admitting someone, following up the next morning, and the patient wasn't there. I mean, things that writing can do, and a writing coach was able to nurture or bring out in us, and more a writing hour that Yale was having because we needed this. So at the very end of the session, she said, anybody have any thoughts? And I said, I've got this collection of Post-its. I've got this collection of quotes, and I joke with my patients, but I'd love to share and see, is there something here? And Brooke, in her wisdom, was like, can we take this offline? I love this. And she ran with it. And even still, even then, I wondered if I could capture what happens in the exam room, what happens in that moment of encounter, what happens between patient and physician, what we're taught since first year about that sacred space. And so that's where my doubts were. And I asked Brooke, and I don't know if she's told you, I asked her, I think 50 times about each 50 quotes. Are you sure? Does it capture what happened? Does it capture what the patient meant? Does it capture how it moved me? Because I wanted to retain the very art of medicine that came from the patients themselves. So from first year med school to global pandemic, pulling out all of these Post-its that I had stashed in a box and going through them with her. And then Stopped in My Tracks was born. And it's really a collection of quotes, a quote per page. And some of them have artwork. I haven't pulled one of those, but that's what happened. Then it was born.
Yeah, that's amazing. Just amazing how so much in what you said. One thing that struck me was when people around you, when you were in your training, were writing down kind of the pearls and nuggets and that type of thing. You were writing down what the patients were saying, and like you said, we are told this so often that the patients will tell you what's wrong with you. You just have to listen. And it's true, because how often, what's the study that says that physicians interrupt patients after like 90 seconds of talking or something ridiculous, maybe even less than that. Maybe I think it's like 18 seconds. It's ridiculously low. 90 seconds is way too long. But it's so true. And so I just think what a gift it was that you gave these patients, that you're listening to them and you're writing down what they're saying and even asking them, hey, can you repeat that? I want to capture that. And so what was the response that you were getting from your patients as you were doing that?
So some of them laughed, like scoffed it off, like, oh, come on. They rolled their eyes. You're not going to quote this. Others loved it, right? Others were like, they'd bring me a quote next time. Like, maybe this will make it to your book someday. But some of them, when they talked about life and death, it was a chance for them to pause too. And, I recommit to that every day when you mentioned it, right? That pausing, what is it that they're inviting us to? Allowing silence. And so in oncology, especially, asking them to say the things that they had just said, when it was really about accepting what was next or questions that they had, it was a moment for them to really hear what they said. And it was like, oh my God, I really said that, or I meant that, or, saying, I want to stop treatment. And I'd be like, wait, what? Yeah, I want to stop my treatment and I want to go write my memoir. I was blown away. She made it to the book, of course, and she meant it. She stopped treatment and then wrote her memoir and didn't spend time at the cancer center. So I recommit every day to hearing, to listening. I pray that I'm teaching it to my students, my residents, because it's true. something happens there. Our history is different. Maybe the plan is different. Just today, I wanted to do something just by the book, and yet something within me was like, that's not going to work for this patient. And I called a colleague of mine and I said, everything says this is the algorithm, but am I missing something? Because I know him. And he's like, you know his social history so well. You know it uniquely. Let it guide your treatment, because that's just as important as family history, surgical history. So that's my love in medicine. The medicine that happens, or the healing that happens when we really listen to them. So that's my thing.
Yeah. It strikes me as so incredible and such a loving, compassionate thing that you do, especially in times when you are maybe not able to offer treatments that are going to extend the person's life or quality of life as a GI oncologist, and you're having these conversations with patients regularly where, we know that the news is not good, and patients are probably confused and scared, and so the fact that you're able to really just ask for their story, you're humanizing them, and you're not just treating them like another patient with colon cancer. You're treating them as a person, and listening to them as a person who has a story, and you want to hear that story. And I just think that's so incredible. I'm it's getting a little emotional about it, thinking about just my own experience as the daughter of somebody who my dad passed away from lung cancer about 4 years ago, and just thinking about that journey with him, and about his medical team that he worked with that was amazing, and really treating him like a person who had agency and respected decisions and that type of thing. But also how scary it was, even for me, being a physician and being in kind of in that role. And I had never heard of some of these drugs, and I don't know what the best thing to do is. And so even though I'm in the medical field, clearly as a physician, there was still a lot of fear and confusion on our part. So I just think that's such a beautiful gift that you are giving your patients, and that you're now teaching residents and other physicians to do the same thing.
Thank you. I'll share two pieces there, or maybe three. One is Dr. Joe Greer. He actually was a gastroenterologist in Miami, was a University of Miami medical student who went under the bridges of Miami when Miami had a really strong homelessness issue. He'd go down there in the streets of Liberty City, and he later became faculty and taught us about how he learned that diabetes was rampant, and yet here was this optimistic medical student who couldn't bring insulin because you need refrigeration, and in Miami, the heat and humidity. So he taught us to look at things a little differently. And he said, I want to bring him up because he later won a National Medal of Freedom under President Obama. And so I'm honored that I learned from him. And he said, I've never had a colon walk into my office. And he invited us to see the patient completely. And he was a gastroenterologist. Now I'm an oncologist. I'm seeing this, and I'm telling my students, or my patients or their families, I don't just want to treat your pancreas cancer or your colon cancer, right? So I got to treat the whole patient. So today I had a patient who came as a second opinion. She's gone through multiple lines of therapy, metastatic pancreas cancer. It's acting very aggressively, so not responding to the therapies that we have that can really extend her life. And here it was as a second opinion. She dropped the fact that she had been to someone else earlier in the day. So now I knew I wasn't a second opinion. I'm like the third or fourth. And I highlighted the options, but then I was so moved that she let me go there. Because then I said, the option that we really need to talk about here is that, what if we don't do this anymore? Like, what if we choose quality? what if, and she uttered it in one of her stories, like, well, does that clinical trial give me any quality? So I took that ball and ran with it. Like, if the goal is quality, let's really weigh quantity. What can we weigh here, and all of that. So I am practicing this. I am practicing medicine, right? Picking up on these words that, like my book, made me stop in my tracks or made me pause. Today it was that. But now I'm trying to be a pupil of Dr. Rita Sharon. She's out of Columbia University, and she's the founder or the mother of narrative medicine. And this whole field of medicine about exactly what you and I are talking about, exactly what you and I are doing in our work, which is that writing helps us and helps the patient. That the way we tell their stories matters, and the way they tell their stories, the way that we're trained to tell a story, like an H&P, can be so different, so vast. We can talk about or we can talk about this patient who came for a third opinion and is really seeking quality. I could talk about the phase 1 trials in pancreas, may not give quality. And so that's what I love now. And those were the 3 points, right, that I wanted to make with that, because again, I'm honored to be, like Rachel Naomi Remen said, right, at the front seat, front row to patients' stories. And that's what we're gifted with. So thank you for calling it a gift I'm giving them, but they're gifting us with the stories, the words they choose, like, blow my mind.
Yeah. And you're using the patient's words in order to guide how you take the conversation. You heard quality from that patient, so you use that to say, hey, this is important to you, then let's talk here. I love that. And we were chatting before we hit record just about this notion of kind of resting for you, and you had this need for kind of putting things down and resting and slowing down. So talk about that a little bit, because I have a ton I could talk about rest and how important it is. And I did a podcast episode on it. It's in my book. So, but I want to hear from you and your experience with that, and kind of what we were chatting about before we started recording.
I'm excited then to listen to it, because we're not taught rest.
Right.
I remember in our training, we had one lecture on sleep. I remember there was a speaker in neurology who spoke on dreams once. We're taught to take care of ourselves, right? And I loved your last guest talking about returning to ancient wisdom and returning to what she knew in meditation and with the body. And we're invited as practitioners of this sacred art to do a holistic approach, right? Mind, body, soul. But what about the rest of the day? Like the rest in the day? Sacred. What time is sacred, right? The coffee sacred, the meditation sacred. But what do we say no to? Or what do we have to put on the shelf? Or what do we pause? And so I have adored merging my career and my art with this book and the birth of Stopped in My Tracks. And I had such a fun year when it first came out. Podcasts and book signings. And then I realized that, oh my God, I'm a new parent, but he's not an infant and he's not a toddler. He's now grade school. And so that was a transition. We came cross country to Arizona. And then I was like, but I need to do more with the book. I need to do more with the book. How can Stopped in My Tracks continue to gain traction? And, or how do I continue to listen to patients in the same way? I felt that I was going through a listening dry spell, that I couldn't hear words that stood out, that I wasn't jotting down anymore. So I just said, by need, let me just put this down. Right? The book is written. The book is out in the world. The people that know it know it. I'll let the ripple effect of that. But I missed it. I missed the writing. I missed the presentation. I missed this. So I put it on hold. I started reading The Artist's Way again. And then things like this, right? Connections. Our writing team put us in contact. I learned about the Purposeful MD, and I'm listening to your podcast, and I brought my book out, and I'm invited to share this. Friday, I came to see a patient, or I went into his room. The nurse told me he was not well, and I went in knowing that I was going to give him a chemo holiday. And he said, he brings out this yellow manila envelope, and he said, "Hey, doc, I need you to sign these papers for my disability." And he pulls out the book, not disability papers. He pulled out my book. I never told him. He told him, some other patient had shared with him, and he wanted me to sign it. What I mean is, when I rested this project, it showed up to me, or it revealed itself, or it's finding its way. I'll share that my girlfriend's mom is now listening to the podcasts because that's how she's getting to know me. If we rest, life continues, right? Momentum and motion. If we're back to scientists, some things continue. And I think art does that. And art has the power to do that. And there's rest to the artist, but the art itself has a life of its own. Almost like never underestimate the power, right, of painting the room or adding flowers to the room. For us not to underestimate the power of words in your podcast, in your writing, or never underestimating the power that this book was gift to my patients, to their families. It makes me think of a patient's husband who, with all of my HIPAA protection, went out to my page and said, "My wife is page X. Please read this." But then when I rested, when I said, "You know what? I want to do all this art, but I can't right now." Almost like when they ask us to write an essay and put it down, it almost takes on a new. So I'm honored to be living this moment of, okay, this is where Stopped in My Tracks is now. And my hospital, my med exec committee is now asking to maybe do something with our staff and listening to patients.
Yeah.
This book is for all of us, that we are all frontline workers, right? Frontline. My MA, my hospital cafe staff, they see our patients week after week. They see the changes in them. My hospital now wants to consider doing, I don't know, kind of a sharing, listening, an art of medicine to what we do. Like, it's not out there. It's the art that we do. And so taking a rest from it, it's kind of shown me where things go, where Stopped in My Tracks is kind of making its way in the world. So I'm really honored. I'm humbled, and I'm sitting back and watching it happen.
Yeah. It's so amazing how when we kind of step back and rest, then all these opportunities open up that were never there before. We're giving them space. And then, like you said, art takes on a life of its own. It's almost like we have to let it breathe, right? And then like a fine bottle of wine, we have to let it breathe, and then it will breathe and become something more beautiful. So I love everything that you're doing. Thank you so much. It's been so wonderful to talk to you. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. For listeners who could be physicians, or all of us who are patients ourselves, right? That count on your words. If there's something you want to say to your physician, to your patient, to your partner, to your child, right? The power of words, the power of rest and silence. But that there's something in our stories. And tell your stories to the world. We're in an election year. Stories matter. I'm moved by the candidates who say, I have been out there and I have heard your story. We as physicians, to listen to patients' stories. You're a coach. You hear these stories every day. There's something in our stories, and they stop me in my tracks.
I love it. Thank you so much for being on. And yeah, just thank you for everything that you're doing.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate this so much.
While I am a physician, the information presented in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. It is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please consult with your own healthcare provider before making any significant changes to your lifestyle or routine. By listening to this podcast, you are not creating a physician-patient relationship. Thank you for listening to the Purposeful MD podcast. If you like what you hear, please rate and review the show. Please also visit my website, www.thepurposefulmd.com, for free downloads or to discuss working with me as your coach.